A company wants to ensure their cloud resources are automatically replaced if a critical resource fails. Which manageability feature would best meet this need? Correct answer, B. Health monitoring with automated resource replacement. Let me explain. This feature is designed to keep your system running smoothly without manual involvement. When a resource fails, say a virtual machine goes down, the system detects the issue and spins up a new one automatically. It's like having a backup plan that activates instantly, which is essential in production environments where uptime is non-negotiable. Now, automatic resource scaling sounds close, but it's mainly about adjusting capacity based on usage, not replacing faulty components. Think of it as adding more workers when demand increases, not replacing someone who didn't show up to work. Command line management lets you control your cloud setup, but it's a manual process. You'd have to step in and fix the problem yourself. Definitely not ideal when seconds matter. Real-time performance alerts notify you about issues. But again, you'll have to take action manually. It's like your phone buzzing to say your battery's low, but you still have to plug it in. So the only option that truly delivers seamless, hands-off recovery is health monitoring with automated resource replacement. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. The pay-as-you-go model is another name for the consumption-based model. True. Cloud pricing is always cheaper than running an on-premises data center. False. In a cloud pricing model, organizations do not need to estimate their future resource needs. False. Cloud resources in a consumption-based model can be quickly provisioned and deprovisioned. True. Let me explain. The pay-as-you-go model is called consumption-based because you're only billed for what you actually use. It's like paying for the minutes you talk on the phone rather than buying unlimited time up front. Cloud pricing isn't always cheaper than running an on-premises data center. While cloud can reduce costs like hardware maintenance, long-term use, especially without optimization, might result in higher expenses compared to a well-managed in-house setup. Although cloud services scale easily, that doesn't mean you can skip estimating your needs. You still need to forecast usage to stay within budget and avoid over-provisioning, just like you'd plan your grocery shopping to avoid waste. Lastly, quick provisioning and deprovisioning is a key benefit of the cloud. You can launch or shut down services almost instantly, which is great for testing, scaling, or adapting to changes in demand. For each cloud security feature listed, drag it to the appropriate box to match it with its description. Requires users to manage OS updates, software patches, and firewall configurations. IS security provides automatic patching and maintenance of the underlying platform. PaaS security uses firewalls, security groups, and access control lists to protect resources. Network security protects against large-scale attacks that attempt to overwhelm cloud resources. DDoS protection, best for organizations that need full control over security configurations. IaaS security ensures secure traffic flow and blocks unauthorized access. Network security minimizes downtime by automatically mitigating external attacks. DDoS protection. Let me walk you through it. IaaS requires the user to handle most security configurations, so things like OS updates and firewall setups fall directly under your responsibility. This model gives full control, which is great for customization, but also means more work. PaaS is more hands-off when it comes to infrastructure. The cloud provider takes care of updates and patches, so developers can focus just on the application without worrying about system-level maintenance. When it comes to traffic and access, that's where network security shines. It includes things like security groups and firewalls that act as gatekeepers, ensuring only approved traffic reaches your systems. DDoS protection is designed for resilience. It keeps your services available even under attack by absorbing and deflecting massive amounts of malicious traffic. It not only protects, but also helps minimize service disruption. Altogether, each feature plays a unique role in a layered security approach, covering everything from infrastructure responsibilities to traffic protection and attack mitigation. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. Azure provides multiple database and analytics services, including Azure SQL Database, which offers structured data storage, and Azure Cosmos DB, which is a globally distributed NoSQL database. For large-scale business intelligence, Azure Synapse Analytics is used, often in combination with Azure Data Lake for storing massive data sets. Let's break it down. Azure SQL Database is a relational database solution ideal for scenarios requiring structured data, think rows and columns with strict schemas, similar to traditional SQL servers. Azure Cosmos DB, on the other hand, is a globally distributed NoSQL solution. It's perfect for applications needing high availability and low latency across multiple regions, like global e-commerce platforms. When it comes to enterprise-scale analytics, Azure Synapse Analytics steps in. It allows you to run complex queries across massive datasets, supporting strategic decisions through deep insights. To support these large datasets, Azure Data Lake acts as the underlying storage engine, designed for handling raw and semi-structured data at scale. So together, these services form a powerful ecosystem for managing and analyzing cloud data. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Cloud computing removes the need for organizations to purchase and maintain physical infrastructure. True. A private cloud is always hosted on premises. False. Hybrid cloud solutions combine both public and private cloud resources. True. Cloud elasticity refers to the ability to pay for only the resources used. False. Let's explain. Cloud computing allows businesses to avoid buying physical servers. Instead, they rent computing power from cloud providers like Microsoft Azure or AWS. This shifts IT from capital expenditure to operational expenditure, which is easier to manage and scale. The idea that private clouds are always hosted on premises is a common misconception. In reality, a private cloud can be hosted off-site by a third party. It just needs to be dedicated to one organization and isolated from others. Hybrid cloud solutions are designed for flexibility. They let companies keep sensitive data on a private cloud while using the public cloud for less critical tasks. This blend helps manage cost, performance, and compliance all at once. Now, cloud elasticity isn't about billing, it's about how fast the system can adapt to demand. For instance, during a flash sale on an e-commerce site, the cloud can instantly spin up more servers to handle traffic, then scale back down when it's over. That dynamic adjustment is what elasticity really means. Which of the following are true about the Azure VMware solution? Select answer. Correct answer, D. It allows organizations to run VMware workloads seamlessly in Azure. Let's explain. Azure VMware solution is designed to integrate directly with your existing VMware environment. That means you don't need to abandon your VMware tools, infrastructure, or workflows. You can keep using what you already know. Just now, it runs in the Azure cloud. It doesn't limit you to private cloud setups either. In fact, the solution supports both private and hybrid configurations, making it flexible for different enterprise needs. Additionally, there's no need to re-architect your environment. You can lift and shift workloads into Azure while keeping your operational model intact. So, the key benefit is that it enables a seamless transition of VMware workloads into Azure without disrupting your current investments or forcing a new setup. Your team is considering a cloud model for a new application that requires low-cost scaling and predictable costs. Which billing models are most suitable for this scenario? Select two answers. Correct answer, B, subscription-based model. D, fixed cost model. Let's go through the explanation. The subscription-based model is ideal when you want predictable monthly billings. It's like subscribing to a streaming service. You pay a set amount every month, regardless of how much you use it. For businesses, this makes forecasting expenses much easier, especially for applications with steady usage. Similarly, the fixed cost model also supports consistent budgeting. It provides a flat rate charge, which is helpful when financial planning is a priority. Even if the application scales, costs remain controlled. In contrast, the consumption-based model charges based on actual usage. While it's flexible and great for variable workloads, costs can spike unexpectedly, which isn't ideal if you're looking to keep things predictable. The pay-as-you-go model works in the same unpredictable way. It's great for startups testing the waters, but not for teams that need to plan around a stable budget. So for predictability and budgeting confidence, the subscription-based and fixed cost models are your best bets. Which of the following would be considered capital expenditures, CapEx, rather than operational expenditures, OpEx? Select two answers. The correct answers are A, purchasing physical servers for a new data center, and D, buying and installing new networking equipment for an office. Let's explain. Purchasing physical servers is a classic example of capital expenditure. It involves a significant upfront investment in hardware that the organization owns and uses long-term. Likewise, buying and installing networking equipment falls into the same category. It's a one-time investment that supports operations over several years, not just a temporary cost. On the other hand, renting cloud services or leasing a vehicle are considered operational expenditures. These are recurring costs without ownership, tied to ongoing operations rather than long-term asset value. So anything that involves buying and owning infrastructure tends to fall under CapEx, while subscription or rental-based services usually count as OpEx. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. Azure provides more than 100 services that enable you to do everything from running your existing applications on virtual machines to exploring new software paradigms, such as intelligent bots and mixed reality. Now let me explain. Microsoft Azure offers a vast and expanding set of cloud services, over 100 in total. These services cover everything from infrastructure and networking to artificial intelligence and developer tools. That's why 100 is the most accurate choice. It reflects the scale and breadth of Azure's capabilities. When it comes to emerging technologies, Azure supports development in areas like AI, machine learning, and mixed reality. Mixed reality refers to the blend of physical and digital worlds, where physical and virtual objects coexist and interact in real time. It's more inclusive than augmented reality because it spans a wider range of immersive experiences. So in the context of Azure, intelligent bots handle automation and user interactions, while mixed reality opens doors to interactive, immersive applications used in education, design, and field service scenarios. Together, these blanks capture both the scale of Azure's services and the innovative use cases it enables. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. AZ-copy is a command line utility for transferring files to Azure Storage, while Azure Storage Explorer provides a graphical user interface for managing storage transfers. Azure File Sync is used to synchronize on-premises file servers with Azure files. Now let me explain. AZ-copy is designed for command line users who need a fast and scriptable way to upload, download, or copy data to and from Azure Storage. It's efficient, lightweight, and great for automation. Azure Storage Explorer, in contrast, gives you a GUI-based experience. That means you can visually browse, upload, or download blobs and files from your storage accounts without writing a single line of code. Azure File Sync bridges your on-premises file servers with the Azure Files service. Instead of lifting and shifting everything to the cloud, you can synchronize files between your local environment and Azure, enabling hybrid storage scenarios where frequently accessed data stays local and older or less used data lives in the cloud. Together, these tools give you the flexibility to manage data in Azure, whether you prefer using code, clicks, or a hybrid mix of both. For each Azure service listed below the table, drag it to the appropriate boxes in the correct match column to match it against its purpose in the option column. Provides complete control over the hosting environment, virtual machines, offers automatic scaling and high availability, hosts web apps, REST APIs, and background tasks, Azure App Service. Ideal for hosting with custom configurations, virtual machines. Supports multiple programming languages, Azure App Service. Now let me explain. Virtual machines offer complete control over the hosting environment. You can install any OS, set up your own runtime stack, and fully configure security and network settings, just like managing your own server. Azure App Service, on the other hand, is a managed platform. It automatically handles scaling and high availability. You don't need to worry about spinning up or down servers. It adjusts based on traffic. When it comes to hosting web apps, REST APIs, or background tasks, Azure App Service is built for that. It streamlines deployment and integrates easily with DevOps tools. If you need to run a legacy app or something that requires a custom software stack, virtual machines give you that freedom. You're not limited by platform constraints. Finally, Azure App Service supports a wide range of programming languages, including .NET, Java, Node.js, Python, and PHP, making it great for teams working with different technologies. So overall, VMs are about control and customization, while App Service is about ease and scalability. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. The zero trust model assumes that every request should be treated as though it comes from an untrusted network. True. Traditional security models rely on network location as an indicator of trust, while zero trust requires continuous verification. True. Zero trust allows unrestricted access to users inside the corporate network without authentication. False zero trust focuses on verifying identity, limiting access, and assuming breaches, rather than trusting pre-established perimeters. True. Now let's explain. Zero trust operates on the principle of never trust, always verify. It assumes that every request, whether it comes from inside or outside the corporate network, should be treated as potentially malicious. So by default, it treats all requests as though they come from an untrusted network. Traditional models, in contrast, assume trust based on location. If you were inside the network, you were trusted. But zero trust challenges that idea. It requires constant authentication and verification, no matter where the user or device is. Zero trust does not give unrestricted access to anyone, even inside the network. Every access request must be authenticated and authorized. There's no blanket trust, even behind the firewall. And finally, the model focuses on verifying identities, limiting user privileges, and assuming that breaches are inevitable. That's why it emphasizes continuous checks and minimizing the damage in case of an attack. In short, zero trust flips the old model by removing assumptions and replacing them with verification at every step. For each network feature listed below the table, drag it to the appropriate boxes in the correct match column to match it against its function in the option column. Allows direct traffic flow between virtual networks, virtual network peering. Connects virtual networks without using the internet, virtual network peering. Overrides default Azure routing, user-defined routes. Controls packet paths between subnets, user-defined routes, UDR, creates a global network between regions, virtual network peering. Now let me explain. Virtual network peering allows direct traffic exchange between Azure virtual networks. It connects them over Microsoft's backbone network, not the public internet, which makes it fast and secure. This peering can also span across regions, effectively creating a private global network across Azure regions, very useful for multinational organizations. User-defined routes, or UDRs, give you control over routing paths in your network. They let you override the default routes that Azure would otherwise apply automatically. This means you can control how traffic moves between subnets or out to other destinations. UDRs are especially helpful when you need to implement network appliances like firewalls or route traffic through inspection points. So both for custom subnet control and replacing Azure's defaults, UDRs are the tool of choice. Determine if the following statements are true or false. Azure Blob Storage can store structured data in tables. False. Azure File Sync allows for bidirectional synchronization between local file shares and Azure files. True. The Archive Access tier in Azure Blob Storage is designed for frequently accessed data. False. Azure Queue storage messages can be as large as 10 megabytes. Now let me explain. Azure Blob Storage is designed for unstructured data like images, videos, or documents, not for structured data in table format. Structured data is handled by Azure Table Storage. Azure File Sync, on the other hand, is perfect for keeping on-premises file servers in sync with Azure files. It works in both directions, local to cloud and cloud to local, making it ideal for hybrid scenarios. The archive tier in Azure Blob Storage is actually intended for rarely accessed data. It offers lower storage costs but higher access latency, making it unsuitable for active files. Finally, Azure Queue Storage limits the size of each message to 64 kilobyte. It's built for lightweight message-based communication between components, not for large data transfers like 10 megabyte payloads. So overall, understanding the purpose and limits of each Azure service helps you choose the right solution for your data and messaging needs. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Network security groups filter traffic at both the subnet and virtual machine level. True. Azure Firewall is a free service included in all Azure subscriptions. False. Azure Bastion eliminates the need for public IPs for remote access. True. NSGs can filter traffic based on domain names and URLs. False. Now let me explain. Network security groups, NSGs, are powerful tools that filter both inbound and outbound traffic at the subnet level and the individual virtual machine level. This gives you flexible control over which traffic can flow in and out of your Azure environment. Azure Firewall, however, is not free. It's a paid enterprise-grade service with advanced features like threat intelligence and domain-based filtering. Pricing starts around $900 per month, depending on usage. Azure Bastion helps with security by eliminating the need for public IP addresses when remotely connecting to VMs. Instead, it provides RDP and SSH access through the Azure portal, keeping those connections private. Finally, NSGs are limited to filtering by IP addresses, ports, and protocols. They do not support filtering by domain names or URLs. If you need that kind of capability, you'd turn to Azure Firewall, which is designed for more advanced inspection and rules. So, NSGs handle basic filtering needs, while services like Bastion and Firewall handle access and advanced filtering, respectively. For each statement below, indicate whether it is true or false. AsCopy is a command line tool used to transfer files into Azure Storage. True. Azure File Sync can be used to synchronize data between Azure Blob Storage and an on-premises file server. False. Azure Storage Explorer provides a user-friendly interface for transferring data within Azure Storage. True. Azure Queue Storage is an ideal tool for moving large files between on-premises storage and Azure. False. Now let me explain. AZCopy is a reliable command line tool built for transferring files into Azure storage accounts. It's lightweight, fast, and ideal for automation scripts. Azure File Sync is designed to sync data between on-premises Windows file servers and Azure files, not Azure Blob Storage. That distinction is important because Blob Storage and Azure files serve different purposes and APIs. Azure Storage Explorer offers a graphical user interface, which makes it easier for users, especially those unfamiliar with the command line, to browse, upload, and manage Azure Storage content visually. Azure Queue Storage, meanwhile, isn't meant for file transfer. It's built for asynchronous messaging, helping applications communicate reliably by storing and delivering message queues between components, not for moving large files. So each tool has its own purpose, and understanding those differences helps you choose the right one for the job. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Azure DNS allows administrators to control who can manage DNS records using role-based access control, RBAC. True. Azure DNS supports activity logs, enabling organizations to track changes and troubleshoot DNS issues. True. Azure DNS does not allow resource locking, meaning records can be accidentally deleted or modified. False. Azure DNS integrates with Azure Monitor, allowing administrators to track DNS query performance. Now let me explain. Azure DNS uses Azure RBAC, which means access to DNS zones and records can be tightly controlled based on user roles. This ensures that only authorized users can make changes. It also supports activity logs, which are essential for auditing and troubleshooting. These logs show who changed what and when, useful when diagnosing DNS issues. Although the statement claims DNS doesn't support resource locking, that's incorrect. Azure DNS does support resource locking, which helps prevent accidental deletions or modifications by adding either a read-only or delete lock. And lastly, Azure DNS integrates with Azure Monitor, allowing you to track DNS query performance and detect resolution delays, giving admins visibility into DNS health and responsiveness. This combination of RBAC, logging, locking, and monitoring makes Azure DNS a secure and manageable solution for enterprise environments. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Azure storage accounts provide unique service endpoints for blob, file, queue, and table storage. True. Storage account names can include uppercase letters, special characters, and spaces. False. The endpoint for blob storage follows the format hstorage-account name blob.core.windows.net. True. Each Azure storage account can host multiple unique namespaces for different users. Now let me explain. Azure storage accounts do indeed provide unique service endpoints for each type of storage: blob, file, queue, and table. This helps separate access and optimize performance across services. However, storage account names have strict rules. They must be between 3 and 24 characters long and can only include lowercase letters and numbers. So uppercase letters, spaces, and special characters aren't allowed. The format for accessing blob storage is consistent and predictable. It uses the structure https storage account name blob.core.windows.net, making it easy to construct and reference URLs. Lastly, Azure storage accounts do not support multiple namespaces within the same account. Each account has a single globally unique namespace, so you can't split it between multiple users with separate identifiers. So, when designing your Azure storage strategy, naming and namespace structure are key to both compliance and clarity. Arrange the following steps involved in using Azure Data Box for data migration in the correct order. The correct order is 1. Order Data Box from Azure Portal. 2. Transfer data onto Data Box using the local web UI. 3. Ship Data Box back to Microsoft. 4. Data is automatically uploaded to Azure. Now let me explain. The first step is to order the Azure Data Box device through the Azure Portal. This initiates the request and gets the physical device shipped to your location. Once you receive the data box, you'll use the local web interface to securely transfer your on-premises data onto the device. This is a key step before shipping anything out. After the data has been loaded, the next step is to ship the data box back to Microsoft. The box is tamper-resistant and fully encrypted to protect your data in transit. Finally, once Microsoft receives the device, the data is automatically uploaded to your specified Azure storage location. This process helps when you're moving large data sets and need an efficient offline transfer method due to bandwidth limitations. A logistics company wants to implement an event-driven solution for processing customer orders. Each order should trigger a function to handle processing, which includes inventory checks and payment processing. The company also wants to avoid paying for resources when there are no incoming orders. Which Azure services or configurations could meet these requirements? Correct answers: A. Azure Functions, C. Durable Functions. Let's go ahead and break this down. Azure Functions is a serverless compute service that automatically scales and only charges you when your code is running. This makes it ideal for handling incoming events like customer orders without needing to keep resources constantly running. Now, Durable Functions builds on top of Azure Functions and allows for defining stateful workflows. This is especially useful for coordinating tasks like inventory checks followed by payment processing, ensuring they happen in sequence, and even allowing for retries if something fails. Meanwhile, Azure Virtual Machines with event listeners would require constant uptime, which goes against the company's desire to reduce idle costs. Similarly, Azure Kubernetes Service is better suited for orchestrating container workloads, not lightweight event-driven tasks. So, in this context, combining Azure Functions and Durable Functions provides an efficient, cost-effective, and scalable way to process events like customer orders on demand. An organization wants to host its DNS records in Azure DNS to provide high availability and integrate with other Azure services. They need to manage these records securely, prevent accidental deletions, and automatically update IP addresses for certain resources. Which features of Azure DNS would help achieve these goals? Select the correct answers are A. Anycast networking, B. Resource locking, and C. Alias records. Now let me explain. Anycast networking ensures high availability by routing DNS queries to the nearest available Azure DNS server. This helps maintain fast and reliable name resolution globally, even under heavy load or regional outages. Resource locking is all about protecting your DNS records. When you apply a lock, it prevents accidental deletions or modifications, especially useful in production environments where changes must be tightly controlled. Alias records simplify DNS management by automatically updating DNS entries when the underlying Azure resource, like a public IP or traffic manager profile, changes. This helps reduce manual updates and potential errors. Although role-based access control, RBAC, is important for managing who can access and modify DNS zones, it doesn't provide automatic IP updates or directly prevent deletions. That's why it isn't one of the selected features for this scenario. What information is not required when signing up for an Azure free account? Select one answer. Correct answer, D, Social Security number. Now let me explain. To create an Azure free account, Microsoft does require a few things to verify your identity and prevent abuse. A phone number is needed for SMS verification, and a credit card is used for identity confirmation, though you won't be charged unless you upgrade your account. You'll also need a Microsoft or GitHub account to sign in and access Azure services. These accounts act as your login credentials and identity provider for Azure Access. However, a Social Security number is not required during the sign-up process. Azure doesn't collect that level of personal detail for account creation, making it the correct choice as the information not required. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Users can choose the size, processor, and RAM specifications of an Azure VM. True, Azure VMs come with fixed storage configurations that cannot be modified. False, networking settings, such as public IP addresses, can be configured for Azure VMs. Pre-configured VM images can be used to quickly deploy VMs in Azure. Now let me explain. Azure offers a wide range of virtual machine sizes and types, each with different combinations of CPU, RAM, and storage to suit your needs. So yes, users can choose those specifications when provisioning a VM. Storage is also customizable. While VMs may start with default storage, users can modify disk types like SSD or HDD, adjust capacities, and add more disks as needed, so they're not fixed and unchangeable. Azure VMs are highly configurable from a networking standpoint too. You can assign public and private IP addresses, configure virtual networks, subnets, and even set up firewalls and NSGs. Lastly, pre-configured VM images help you save time. These images come with operating systems and sometimes apps already installed, so you can get your environment up and running quickly with minimal setup. Which storage service offers fully managed file shares in the cloud that are accessible by using Server Message Block (SMB) protocol? Select only one answer. Correct answer, B, Azure Files. Now let me explain. Azure Files is specifically built to offer fully managed file shares in the cloud that use the SMB protocol. This makes it easy to mount the shares like traditional network drives, whether from on-premises systems or Azure VMs. It's ideal for scenarios where applications or users need file-level access across environments. Azure Disk Storage, while powerful, provides block-level storage for virtual machines and doesn't support file sharing over SMB. Azure Queue Storage is used for messaging between application components, great for asynchronous workflows but not for file sharing. Azure Table Storage, on the other hand, is a NoSQL data store meant for structured key-value storage, not for hosting or accessing file shares. So when you need cloud-based file sharing using SMB, Azure Files is the way to go. Which of the following is a feature provided by Microsoft Entra ID for managing cloud and on-premises apps? Select one answer. Correct answer, B, Application Proxy. Now let me explain. Application Proxy is a powerful feature within Microsoft Entra ID that enables secure remote access to on-premises applications. It acts as a bridge between external users and internal resources, allowing you to manage both cloud and on-prem apps seamlessly and securely. Multi-factor authentication (MFA), while critical for identity protection, is primarily a security measure, not a tool for app management. Windows Hello for Business is a passwordless authentication method that helps users sign in without passwords. Again, useful for access but not directly tied to managing applications. Azure File Sync is designed to synchronize file data between on-premises servers and Azure files. It doesn't play any role in managing cloud or on-prem apps. So for application access and management across hybrid environments, Application Proxy is the feature you're looking for in Microsoft Entra ID. Your organization requires data to remain within a specific geographical boundary due to regulatory requirements. Which options would help you meet these requirements when setting up your Azure infrastructure? Select two answers. The correct answers are A. Deploy resources within an Azure region pair located in the required geography, and B. Use a sovereign region specific to the country where your organization operates. Now let me explain. When regulatory compliance demands that data stays within certain boundaries, Azure region pairs become vital. These pairs are intentionally located within the same geography and are designed for disaster recovery and data residency compliance, keeping your resources and backups local. Next, using a sovereign region like Azure Government or Azure China ensures that your data infrastructure complies with country-specific legal and privacy requirements. These regions operate independently and are ideal for organizations with strict data control needs. On the other hand, zone-redundant services help with high availability across zones, but they don't guarantee geographical compliance. Similarly, pinning resources to a specific availability zone only aids in fault tolerance, not in enforcing data residency laws. So, if compliance and regulatory boundaries are top priority, region pairs and sovereign regions are your go-to solutions. You are migrating a legacy enterprise application to Azure. The application requires NTLM authentication and group policy, but does not support modern authentication. You want to avoid managing domain controllers and operating system maintenance. Which solution best meets these requirements? Select one answer. Correct answer, C. Use Azure Active Directory Domain Services for managed legacy authentication. Now let me explain. You're migrating a legacy enterprise application to Azure. This application requires NTLM authentication and group policy and does not support modern authentication. You also want to avoid managing domain controllers and operating system maintenance. That's why the best solution is Azure Active Directory Domain Services. It provides legacy authentication protocols like NTLM and Kerberos, supports group policy, and importantly, it's fully managed. That means no domain controller setup or OS patching responsibilities. Microsoft takes care of that. On the other hand, continuing with on-premises AD or deploying AD on a VM requires you to maintain infrastructure. Entra ID alone doesn't support the legacy protocols your app needs. So Azure AD Domain Services is the ideal balance. It supports legacy needs and removes your operational burden. Your company has on-premises file servers that are running out of space. The team wants to maintain the current file sharing experience while extending storage capacity to the cloud without disrupting existing workflows. Which solution should you implement? Select one answer. Correct answer, B, Azure File Sync. Now let me explain. The question states your company has on-premises file servers running out of space, and you want to extend storage to the cloud without disrupting the current file sharing experience. Azure File Sync is the perfect solution here. It enables your on-premises servers to sync with Azure Files, effectively extending storage capacity while allowing your users to keep using the same shared folders and access paths they're familiar with. Azure Blob Storage, on the other hand, is for object storage, great for app data and backups, but not suitable for traditional file sharing use. Virtual machines with attached storage would increase management overhead and wouldn't provide a native file share experience without setting up and managing your own file server in the cloud. Temporary storage disks are exactly that, temporary. They aren't reliable for persistent storage and can lose data when the VM reboots or is deallocated. So to seamlessly extend file server capacity to the cloud with no disruption, Azure File Sync is the way to go. For each cost management tool listed below the table, drag it to the appropriate boxes in the correct match column to match it against its primary use in the option column. Correct matches. 1. Provides resource estimates based on selected configurations. Pricing calculator. 2. Sets spending limits with alert notifications. Cost alerts. 3. Compare on-premises and Azure expenses. TCO calculator. 4. Tracks costs by billing cycle and resource type. Cost analysis. 5. Budget alerts for unexpected spending. Cost alert. 6. Displays costs for provisioning specific Azure services. Pricing calculator. 7. Identifies trends in spending by resource. Cost analysis. 8. Projects costs for Azure versus existing infrastructure. Now let me explain. The pricing calculator helps estimate costs based on selected Azure services and configurations, which is ideal during the planning phase. If you're budgeting or preparing a proposal, this is the go-to tool. Cost alerts are all about control. You use this when you want to be notified the moment your spending hits a certain threshold. It's especially useful for managing unexpected budget spikes or staying within set limits. The TCO calculator I have, or total cost of ownership tool, helps you compare the cost of running workloads in Azure versus on-premises. It's valuable when presenting a business case for cloud migration. Cost analysis dives deep into trends. It helps track how costs are distributed over time and by resource, and can give insights into billing cycles and usage patterns. So whether you're estimating, comparing, or keeping an eye on budgets, these tools offer a complete toolkit for managing Azure costs. Fill in the blanks by selecting the correct options from the drop-down menus. Azure Monitor is a platform for collecting data from resources, analyzing it, and acting on the insights by setting up Alert Dashboard. Now let me explain. Azure Monitor plays a central role in Azure's observability strategy. It collects telemetry data from a wide range of sources like applications, operating systems, and Azure services, and then helps you make sense of that data. To act on the collected insights, alerts can be configured to notify you when certain thresholds or anomalies are detected. For instance, you can set an alert to trigger if a virtual machine's CPU usage spikes above 80% for more than 5 minutes. Meanwhile, dashboards give you visual feedback, making it easier to interpret trends and spot issues at a glance. Think of them as your mission control for performance and health data. Together, Monitor, Alert, and Dashboard enable proactive management of resources and help you catch problems before they escalate. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Azure Monitor only collects logs from Azure resources. Metrics provide numerical data regarding resource performance. True. Azure Monitor can generate alerts based on specific log conditions. True. Azure Monitor can be integrated with third-party tools for additional analysis. True. Now let me explain. Azure Monitor does not only collect logs from Azure resources. It can also gather logs from external sources like on-premises servers or other cloud environments using agents and APIs. This makes it a versatile monitoring platform. In contrast, metrics in Azure Monitor refer to real-time numerical data such as CPU usage, memory consumption, or request count. This type of data is ideal for detecting performance trends and thresholds. Additionally, Azure Monitor allows you to configure alerts based on both metric thresholds and log conditions. For example, you can set an alert to trigger if a specific event is written to the logs, such as repeated login failures or service errors. Finally, Azure Monitor can be integrated with third-party tools like Grafana, Splunk, and others for enhanced data analysis and visualization. This flexibility helps organizations tailor monitoring to their unique needs. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Azure Monitor collects and analyzes data from only Azure resources. False. Azure Log Analytics allows users to write and run log queries to analyze collected data. True. Azure Monitor can trigger automated actions based on threshold conditions. True. Azure Monitor alerts can notify administrators when a virtual machine's CPU usage exceeds a predefined threshold. Now let me explain. Azure Monitor does not only collect and analyze data from Azure resources, it can also handle data from on-premises environments, other cloud providers like AWS and GCP, and custom applications via agents and APIs. This makes it a multi-cloud monitoring solution, so the first statement is false. Azure Log Analytics, a key feature of Azure Monitor, allows you to write powerful queries using Custo Query Language, KQL, to filter, sort, and analyze log data for insights, which makes the second statement true. As for automation, Azure Monitor supports actions triggered by thresholds, for instance, scaling up down, restarting services, or sending notifications when certain metric or log-based conditions are met. So, the third statement is also true. Lastly, Azure Monitor alerts can notify administrators when specific thresholds are crossed, such as CPU usage exceeding 80% on a virtual machine. This helps with proactive performance monitoring, confirming the fourth statement as true. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Reserved instances require an upfront commitment for 1 or 3 years in exchange for a discount. True. Budget alerts in Azure notify users only when monthly spending exceeds their subscription cost. False. The TCO calculator helps users compare costs between Azure and on-premises infrastructure. Azure Cost Management includes tools to create budgets and track costs by service or resource group. Now let me explain. Reserved instances offer predictable pricing in exchange for a 1 or 3 year commitment. This discount model is ideal for long-term workloads where usage patterns are consistent. Budget alerts in Azure are not limited to monthly subscription thresholds. You can configure them to trigger at any point within a budget using percentage-based or custom values, making them more dynamic and customizable. The TCO calculator is designed to compare costs between running infrastructure on-premises and migrating it to Azure. It helps organizations plan cloud adoption by estimating savings. Azure Cost Management provides comprehensive tools for tracking and analyzing cloud spending. It allows you to create budgets and view cost data across services, subscriptions, and resource groups to maintain control over expenditures. A company has multiple departments using Azure. Each department is responsible for its own budget and needs a way to control costs. Which feature can they use to automatically notify the department heads when their spending reaches a set percentage of their quota? Correct answer, C. Department Spending Quota Alerts. Now let me explain. Department Spending Quota Alerts are specifically designed for enterprise environments where multiple departments manage their own budgets. These alerts notify department heads when their spending reaches a set threshold of their allocated quota, helping to maintain control over distributed costs. Why the other options are incorrect. Credit alerts notify when Azure credits, e.g. from an enterprise agreement, are low, but they're not tailored to departmental tracking. Cost analysis provides insights into spending trends, but doesn't actively send notifications or enforce thresholds. Budget alerts can notify users about overall budget thresholds, but they're not department-specific and won't trigger based on departmental quotas. So for departmental quota-based tracking and notifications, department spending quota alerts are the right tool. Which of the following factors does not directly influence the cost of Azure resources? D. Time of day. Now let me explain. Azure pricing is not influenced by the time of day. Whether you use a virtual machine at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m., the rate remains consistent. However, the resource type, e.g. VM, storage, database, the subscription type, like pay-as-you-go or reserved instances, and the geography, region where the resource is deployed, all have direct effects on pricing. For instance, running the same VM in West US and East Asia may result in different charges due to regional tax rates, infrastructure availability, and other localized factors. So while your workload patterns might change by time of day, your pricing won't. An administrator tests a Docker image in a virtual machine. It works during testing but fails when deployed on a Linux virtual machine, throwing an incompatibility error. The most likely cause is C. The Docker image was created with Windows OS as its primary operating system. Correct Docker containers are OS specific. If an image is built on Windows, it relies on the Windows kernel. When run on a Linux VM, it fails because Linux uses a different kernel. Containers must be based on an OS that matches the host kernel. No automatic translation exists between Windows and Linux at the container level. A. The Docker image is corrupt. Incorrect corruption would usually result in a loading or extraction error, not a compatibility issue. B. The application runtime components are not compatible with the Linux OS. Incorrect runtime incompatibility typically surfaces after the container starts, not during startup. D. The Docker image was built on Windows OS, but the developer forgot to include OS-compatible converters. Incorrect. There's no such thing as OS-compatible converters in Docker. The image must simply match the host OS. What should you use to access Azure Cloud Shell? Select only one answer. Correct answer: A. A web browser. Let's break this down. Azure Cloud Shell is a browser-based command line tool that gives you direct access to Azure resources. It doesn't require you to install anything locally. Just open a browser, go to shell.azure.com, or use the Cloud Shell button in the Azure portal. Now, while Azure Resource Manager is important for deploying and managing resources, it's not a way to access the Cloud Shell. Visual Studio Code can connect to Azure services, but it's not the interface for launching Cloud Shell. And although you can use the local command line with tools like Azure CLI or PowerShell, that's separate from the browser-based experience Cloud Shell offers. So again, the only thing you really need to access Azure Cloud Shell is a web browser. What are the maximum limits of services available with an Azure subscription? Choose 3 answers. Correct answers: B. 250 Azure storage accounts per region. C. 980 resource groups per subscription across all regions. E. 25,000 virtual machines per region. Now let's break it down and explain. First, Azure allows up to 250 storage accounts per region. This is a hard cap and ensures storage scalability within defined boundaries. Second, a single Azure subscription can support up to 980 resource groups across all regions. This helps with organizing and managing resources logically without hitting structural limits too quickly. Finally, for virtual machines, Azure supports up to 25,000 VMs per region under one subscription. This high limit is essential for enterprises that operate massive workloads across large infrastructure footprints. So altogether, these limits reflect Azure's capacity to support enterprise-grade scalability while keeping resource management efficient. Your organization plans to deploy several production virtual machines that will have consistent resource usage throughout the year. What can you use to minimize the costs of the virtual machines without reducing the functionality of the virtual machines? Correct answer: B. Azure reservations. Let's walk through the explanation. Azure reservations help you save money by committing to a 1 or 3 year term for services like virtual machines. So instead of paying the regular pay-as-you-go rate, you get a significantly reduced rate, sometimes up to 72% off, for workloads you know will run consistently. Now, although Azure Monitor alerts are helpful for tracking performance and sending notifications, they don't actually lower costs. Similarly, spending limits are only available on certain subscription types and don't help reduce the price of running VMs over time. That's why Azure reservations are the most cost-effective choice here for long-term, predictable usage without compromising on performance. You are working in an organization that collaborates with external consultants. You need to grant access to an Azure application while ensuring that consultants do not need to manage multiple accounts. What is the best solution? Correct answer: C. Invite consultants using Entra External ID for partners. Let's break it down clearly. Entra External ID for partners lets external users access your organization's resources using their existing credentials without needing you to create new accounts for them. This simplifies identity management and still keeps things secure within your Azure environment. On the other hand, issuing new user IDs adds unnecessary overhead and confusion, especially for external users. Requiring Microsoft accounts only is too restrictive, since Entra External ID supports various identity providers. And giving full admin access? That's a security risk and goes against the principle of least privilege. So the smart move is inviting them with Entra external ID for partners. It keeps things easy, secure, and scalable.